Saraki blames executive branch on late submission of budget, says it lacks foresight. Discos blame government's directive for power generation below optimal level. In international news, earthquakes strike Indonesia, graze Fiji and Tonga. And in sport, Nigeria may escape FIFA hammer by midnight.
This is ANN News.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Senate President Bukola Saraki has faulted the executive branch for the late submission of INEC's budget for next year's election. He says the budget was late in reaching the National Assembly and that it showed no foresight. In a statement signed by the Special Advisor to the Senate President on New Media, Olu Onemola, Saraki said in spite of the failure of the executive branch to submit the budget on time, the Committee of the National Assembly had been working to ensure a due process was followed in approving the request. He said the executive branch had from January to June this year to submit the budget request, but quote, due to a perceived lack of foresight, display of usual tardiness or an attempt to ensure due process would not be followed, this request was submitted only a few days before the statutory National Assembly annual recess.
On the issue of the INEC request, it's amazing how nobody is asking. Is it the day we're leaving that INEC realized that they had a budget? There was January, February, March, April, May, June. Nothing came from the executive to say we need money for INEC until July when we're leaving.
The Independent National Electoral Commission has described the violent disruption of Saturday's Rivers House of Assembly by-election as shameful. The vote to fill Port Harcourt's Constituency 3 of the House of Assembly was marred by disruption of electoral materials. There were also attacks on electoral offices. Hoodlums also carted away ballot boxes. The seat was declared vacant after former occupant Victor Ohunhu became chairman of the Port Harcourt local government area. INEC says it was grossly disappointed when politicians stormed polling units with thugs and armed security personnel to disrupt the election. But Governor Nyesom Wike is accusing the electoral body of consistent sabotage. Imo State's former governor Eze Madumere's lawsuit continued today, challenging his impeachment by the State House of Assembly. He is asking the court to set aside his removal from office. Madumere says lawmakers have filed a court order restraining them from doing anything that would affect the subject matter of the suit. He was sacked by 19 of the State Assembly's 27 members. The power generation companies in Nigeria, GENCOs, have listed 6 conditions that must be met by the federal government for them not to shut down. The group has kicked against the federal government's selection of the Transmission Company of Nigeria to manage the 72 billion naira financial investment it intends to inject into the distribution network nationwide. Not only that, the DISCOs have also faulted the National Control Centre's directive to generate electricity below optimal level, calling it a major hindrance to the nation's goals of having efficient power supply. But the Association of Electricity Distributors said it is getting much less power than the 6,000 megawatts capacity of all 11 DISCOs. It said, quote, "This is not our figure, this is the figure from the TCN side. What we are getting is too low than what we are supposed to be getting," end quote. The Lagos State government will shut down the 3rd mainland bridge temporarily for 4 days, starting on Thursday, to make it easy for investigative maintenance tests on the bridge. It says this closure is to avoid casualties. The Commissioner for Works and Infrastructure, Ade Akinsoye, said this will enable the federal government to know the true state of the bridge. He said, 1, this is ascertained, work will commence by the end of the year. The 3rd mainland bridge opened 30 years ago. In the spirit of Eid al-Kabir celebrations, 55,000 Nigerians in the Holy Land of Mecca have joined 2 million other Muslim faithful on Mount Arafat for prayers. The event has featured pilgrims' supplications for Allah's guardians and forgiveness of sins. The chairman of the National Hajj Commission of Nigeria, Alhaji Abdullahi Mukhtar, said the commission commenced the movement early to reduce the harsh effect of the weather. Meanwhile, back in Nigeria, Inspector General of Police Ibrahim Idris has ordered massive deployment of police personnel across the country, especially to worship centers and recreational facilities as the nation celebrates Eid al-Kabir. This sounds like bleat on Nigeria. The National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons has disclosed that more than 10,000 Nigerian girls are forced into prostitution every year. Director General Julie Donley says the number was based on figures released by the International Organization on Migration and that the federal government is doing all it can to tackle the menace. She said Edo, Kano and Delta states were ranked first, second and third across the state as to the origins of the women involved.
If you know fit go internet or follow for Twitter, you know fit snap photo send or get it photo send. Now because you dey use Palasa, your phone no dey answer. See me see wahala. My brother, go get smartphone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no go for your hand, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone. Phone wey no fit take selfie. Drop that Palasa phone. No be correct phone, yeah. Drop that Palasa phone.
Upgrade to a smartphone today and get double data for 6 months on any MTN data bundle you buy. Simply purchase a smartphone from any store, anywhere in Nigeria, or bring your current smartphone from any network. Insert your MTN SIM card to start enjoying your double data bonus. Offer is open to all new and existing MTN subscribers. Join the largest smartphone movement today.
Make it known for your hand,
In business news, the market capitalization of equities listed on the Nigeria Stock Exchange has fallen more as 56 firms recorded price depreciation. The NSE All-Share Index and market capitalization fell by 0.5 percentage point to close the week at 35,000 basis points. 16 equities appreciated in price during the week. There is hope for farmers and perhaps new routes that could help them access funds for agriculture. In the past, farmers were the least customers banks would consider for loans. But times have changed as banks now actively seek agricultural businesses. Good reason for that, the central bank has amended the commercial agriculture credit scheme by pegging maximum loans to 2 billion naira. CBN has promised banks to lend to agriculture and manufacturing a 9% refund of part of their cash reserve ratio. This is probably the first time in Nigerian banking history where manufacturers will be able to take fixed interest loans for 7 years. There have been several negative reactions to Oyo State's demolition of the music house from which Fresh FM operates. The radio station belongs to gospel music star Yinka Ayefele. Government bulldozer arrived at the building in Ibadan, pulled it down. Sources say the state government had ignored a court restraint on the demolition. Hundreds of sympathizers besieged the venue expressing dismay, and opposition political figures from the PDP, APC and even former Vice President Atiku Abubakar were there to express their disapproval. Nigeria Bar Association and the Nigerian Union of Journalists have expressed their disgust at the move. Up next, many around the world react to Kofi Annan's death, and later scores die in earthquake in Indonesia and Fiji.
There is a new all-news network on the scene in Nigeria to give news from a purely news perspective and to promote free information flow across Africa. Fresh views, unbiased, bold, with a purely African view. African News Network, ANN, in a truly African spirit.
I am Lucy Adeyemi.
I am Rotimi Akintunde.
I am Olajumoke Olatunji.
We bring you
The news
On ANN News.
Business.
politics.
Global news.
Watch ANN News.
In a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to African stories. 2 children were killed and 4 others wounded when a homemade grenade exploded in the Anif area east of the Algerian capital. Local media said on Sunday, armed groups had placed the improvised explosive there to delay the advance of security forces pursuing them in the mountainous region. The grenade exploded near 6 children between 10 to 12 years old who were playing in the village. 4 wounded children are in serious condition. The deadly Ebola outbreak in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo has now claimed 49 lives since the start earlier this month. World Health Organization expects more cases. The government has said there's a further 2,000 people feared to have come into contact with the virus, which adds to the woes of a country already facing violence, displacement and political uncertainty. Health Ministry said confirmed cases are verified through laboratory tests on samples taken from patients. It says most deaths were recorded in the agricultural village of Mangina, 30 kilometers southwest of the city of Beni, while 3 deaths occurred in neighboring province of Ituri. People across Africa are expressing shock and sorrow over the death of Ghanaian-born Kofi Annan, the first black African to become UN Secretary General. His death at age 80 was announced Saturday. African leaders, including Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari, are offering condolences. Nigeria's Amina Mohammed, the UN Deputy Secretary General, says in a tweet that Annan gave hope to the voiceless. Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo ordered flags to fly at half-mast for a week and reassured the country that the former UN Secretary General and Nobel Peace Prize winner left the world without pain. Military forces of Somalia's semi-autonomous Puntland region have retaken a strategic town from Islamic militant group Al-Shabaab. Captain Said Mohammed Diriye said his forces retook Af Uruz without a fight. The town is important because the main road that links the cities of Garowe, Buzazo and the Somali capital Mogadishu is nearby. Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab fighters had captured the town over which they and Puntland had fought last month. Al-Shabaab wants to expel the African Union-mandated peacekeeping force, AMISOM, from Somalia, topple its central government and establish an administration based on a strict interpretation of Islamic Sharia law. For decades, the Nairobi River has been besieged by the construction of buildings teetering perilously over its banks, bringing pollution, blockages and floods to the waterway that runs through the capital. The government has taken bulldozers to the problem in a demolition campaign begun this month. Shopping malls, a petrol station and a coffee shop have been leveled in Nairobi, to the horror of business people who insist that official permits prove their buildings are legal. A presidential spokesperson said such permits had no legal force, citing widespread corruption. The spokesperson said land by the riverbank is not supposed to have any buildings on it. The government's efforts is shared by many in the city of more than 4 million who have watched with dismay as apartments, blocks, shopping malls and even swimming pools have popped up along the river. The late Kenyan environmental activist Wangara Maathai, the first African woman to win the Nobel Peace Prize, tried in vain to halt such construction. Egypt's chief prosecutor says Cyprus has extradited the hijacker of an Egyptian plane that was diverted to the Mediterranean island 2 years ago. Prosecutor Nabil Sadek said Egyptian police have taken custody of Saif Eddin Mustafa in Nicosia, the Cypriot capital. 60-year-old Mustafa hijacked a domestic Egyptian plane in March 2016 using a fake suicide belt and diverted it to Cyprus. Mustafa said he did it to protest against Egypt's government. Cypriot prosecutors said Mustafa later told authorities he only did so to reunite with his estranged Cypriot family after 24 years. He was arrested and has been held in Cyprus since then. In November, Cyprus Supreme Court rejected Mustafa's appeal against his extradition. Mali's Constitutional Court on Monday confirmed President Ibrahim Boubacar Keita's re-election in a run of ballots, rejecting fraud accusations by the opposition candidate Somali Sisi. The decision paves the way for 73-year-old incumbent Keita to be inaugurated next month for a second 5-year term at a time when Malian authorities are contending with rising violence by jihadist groups and ethnic militia. Challenger Somali Sisi had contested the Electoral Commission results, which showed Keita winning 67% of the votes. He charged the Somali results were rigged. He claimed to have won the election with 51.75% of the vote, but the court rejected his petition as being inadmissible or unsupported by evidence. The European Union Observer Mission and other local and international monitors said, despite a number of irregularities and disruptions, there was no evidence of fraud. Ethiopia has inaugurated in Addis Ababa a power plant which converts waste into energy. The plant is located next to a filthy open-air dump where a landslide killed more than 100 persons last year. The facility is now said to be the first of its kind in Africa. The government and a British company, Cambridge Industries, who are behind the project, said it would turn 1,400 tons of waste per day into energy. Ethiopian President Mulatu Teshome said the country has been investing extensively in hydropower, geothermal, wind energy and now biomass to boost the manufacturing sector with a supply of clean, renewable energy. Still ahead, international news. Hundreds die in earthquakes in Indonesia, Fiji and Tonga. Later, we'll tell you about Nigeria's brush with FIFA. Stay with us.
While the world sleeps, ANN News stays awake. News takes no time off. We are awake so you can sleep. We report the stories that keep you up to date, events that affect your day, your week, month and experiences. We scour the world, bringing it to your living room. Watch ANN News in a truly African spirit.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. Now to international stories. Earthquakes shook several islands in the South Pacific and Indonesia on Sunday. A 6.9 magnitude earth shaker centered just 4 kilometers south of Balanting on the Indonesia island of Lombok. The island is still recovering from the devastating effect of an earlier earthquake that killed more than 400 people early this month. No casualties or damage were reported immediately after Sunday's quake near Balanting. Meanwhile, a point in the Pacific Ocean close to Fiji and Tonga was hit by a massive 8.2 quake. U.S. Geological Survey says the earthquakes were not too deep to cause any damage. A state funeral for the 18 victims of last week's bridge collapse in Genoa, led by Italian President Giuseppe Conte, was attended by thousands of mourners over the weekend. Grieving relatives had gathered last Friday at the hall in Genoa, where rows of coffins were laid out for Saturday's state funeral. Family members embraced, prayed and placed photographs and flowers in the coffins of their loved ones. But some families reportedly stayed away, seeking private burials for their loved ones. It was rumored those families were angry with the government. Reports say the death toll from the tragedy had risen to 42. Although no one else is believed to still be missing, rescuers have reportedly found more bodies under the rubble of the collapsed bridge. Military teams, disaster response forces and local fishermen in Kerala, India, have reached some of the worst hit areas in the floods that have ravaged the area in the last week. 22,000 people have been rescued so far by Sunday after the rains eased. Helicopters also brought much-needed supplies to the communities cut off by 2 weeks of unseasoned rain. Kerala Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan said that more than 700,000 people are now taking refuge in more than 5,000 relief camps. More than 300 people have been killed, most of them in landslides since the monsoon started 2 months ago. The man who drove a car into a crowd outside Britain's Houses of Parliament has been charged with 2 counts of attempted murder. 3 people were hurt last week when the car collided with cyclists, pedestrians and police officers before crashing into barriers outside the Parliament. Qatar was arrested at the scene. Nobody was killed and no weapons were found. Qatar is a Sudanese-born UK national. North and South Korean families and relatives separated since the Korean War of the 1950s are reunited in North Korea. The war had left the Korean peninsula divided, and people who lived on the northern side were unable to leave. The two Koreas, which are still technically at war, have organized reunion events before, but this is the first in 3 years. The South Koreans were chosen by lottery. The oldest among the winners is 101 years old. 100 people had been selected by each side, but some dropped out after realizing the relatives they had hoped to see were no longer alive. A 92-year-old woman said she was going to be seeing her son for the first time since the end of the war. Coming up, Nigeria and FIFA still dueling. Nigeria looking for ways to avoid FIFA sanctions.
Are you sure you want to do this?
Adam, go and bring us your husband. Okay, hello baby.
We're in this together, okay? Can you hear me? Keep coming forward.
Wait, stop.
You okay, lean to your right. Keep walking down. Keep walking to the left. Yes.
You're almost here.
Keep going.
You are here. Wow, you did it.
I'm just so glad I didn't have to use my cane to do this.
And I am so glad no other man got you before me. Let me be your eyes.
We will never stop working to give you a network you can rely on, so you can enjoy life's special moments. MTN, everywhere you go.
Welcome back. This is CNN News. In sports, the Nigerian government has finally recognized Amaju Pinnick as the leader of the Nigeria Football Federation. With that, Nigeria has been able to escape FIFA sanctions. Media assistant to Vice President Yemi Osinbajo said on Monday the federal government had conveyed to FIFA a letter to that effect. He said the current executive committee led by Pinnick is the only NFF board. He also said the federal government would continue to engage all relevant parties to resolve the dispute in a timely manner. The government initially backed Chris Giwa as the NFF president, a decision rejected by the World Football Governing Body. Now, Nigeria has worked its way out of a possible FIFA sanction. Super Eagles manager Gana Roy is expected back in the country today to begin preparations for Nigeria's African Cup of Nations qualifier against Seychelles next month. Nigeria are expected to travel to Victoria next month for their second match before coming back home to host Libya. Nigeria lost their first match to South Africa in Uyo last year in the Cameroon 2019 African Nations Cup qualifying series. Raw is expected to inspect and choose a suitable stadium for the third qualifier. He would also review names of players for the two matches ahead, bearing in mind that one of his main stars, Victor Moses, has decided to quit the national team. Sources say he will also meet with the technical department of the NFF to settle outstanding issues that cropped up during Russia 2018. That is CNN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on this and other stories, visit our website, knnafrica.net. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at CNN Africa TV. I am Olajumoke Olatunji. Have a pleasant evening.